an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Magicians, Season 1, Episode 9, The Writing Room. In this episode, the whole crew gets wrapped up in what went on at the author of Fillory's house. And it turns out shit was fucked up. We're talking, what about C.S. Lewis but evil? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Huge thanks, first of all, to Mathy for commissioning this episode. Really appreciating it, Mathy, keeping me on task with this. Man, this episode, y'all. First of all, can we just talk about the fact that what our poor Quentin goes through here, and this is a rare moment of me actually having some sympathy for him, is the thing that I think so many of us have recently experienced, which is I have spent my entire life loving this thing / property / person / creator, whatever. And I just found out they're garbage or a straight up monster. And this is something that I think all of us at one point or another, especially over the last 10 years with social media being a very different beast than I think many of us expected it to be, there have been so many more instances of people, either people who are still alive, showing their ass somehow by saying some stupid shit that they did not think through, or saying some shit that they did think through and thought was a good idea. Or we have people who have been dead a while, and suddenly all of this information that it turns out was a sort of open secret is suddenly brought back up again to those of us who all thought it was just like a vague rumor. And we get a lot more in-depth reports from various people from that person's life confirming the shit that we had all thought was kind of just hearsay. And then we have to deal with that. And it has happened with, find a celebrity, name one, and I will bet you that this has happened. We've got David Bowie, we've got Prince, we've got fucking Bill Cosby, Louis C.K. There's just like so many different people. J.K. Rowling is like recently just really not doing awesome about her repping for trans people. There have been so many moments of, oh my God, wait, what? And us having to decide whether or not we are interested in or capable of separating the art from the artist, as they say. And some people can do that more readily than others. And some of us are prepared to do that on a sliding scale depending on how egregious the offense was. So somebody like Bill Cosby, for me, that person is fucking canceled, the end, goodbye. Somebody like J.K. Rowling, whom I've like built a whole fucking livelihood around her work, it's a lot more difficult to just be done, you know? And what's going on here is such a strange thing in this episode because Quentin has built his like life around Fillory in a way that felt ridiculous and foolish until just a short time ago. So he was only very recently finding out that information he had retained from those books was actually useful in some way. Not maybe like as useful as he thought, because it turns out most of what he knows about Fillory is not a direct translation of what actually happened. It turns out to be like a child-friendly version. But he had just started to get used to the idea that maybe being in love with and obsessed with Fillory was a fucking advantage. And maybe everybody who had always made fun of him for being obsessed with and into Fillory was gonna start to feel like a real asshole for it. And then we find this out, that this person whom he idolized, who wrote all of those books, was an abuser, a rapist, a fucking psychopath. And that he and his sister had a reign of terror on some children who had no means of defending themselves except by escaping to this other place. Is really the sort of vibe that I got, was like that was a way for Jane to get the fuck out of this place, right? This episode is actually kind of complicated, and this is one of the few times that, because I was super busy over this weekend, I didn't get a chance to watch it twice, and I kind of wish I had, and I'm hoping that I'm going to have time to rewatch this one before starting the next one for the next episode. Because I feel like there is a lot that I could potentially have missed here. So, yeah, it looks like there's not another Magicians until next week, the 23rd. So I think I'm going to have time, so hopefully. Oh, Jesse and Mathy are both in the chat. Hello to both of you. Thank you for commissioning this, Mathy. So, okay, let's get started on talking about what actually happens here, because there is a lot going on. We start off with Quentin laying next to Alice in bed, staring at the ceiling, obviously very preoccupied with something. And he has gotten a letter from Julia that she wrote from rehab, and she is attempting to make amends and apologize for what she did, while at the same time not completely letting him off the hook. And I really like that. She specifically says, I know you're not supposed to say you fucked up too, but let's be honest here, guy. You fucked up too. And she ain't wrong. Thank you, Julia. Yes, 100%. So, yeah, I really, really loved that. And I just, he isn't really prepared to forgive her. When he responds to her, he says something like, it looks like we're both still pissed, which, yeah. And he says that he is really glad that she's okay. And he wants her to take care of herself. She had said something about how, like, I really want to, I miss the way things were between us. And when he writes back, he says that he is sorry too, but he doesn't really reference what their friendship had been, which I feel like is a pretty significant thing, that she is vaguely, not exactly being like, can we just go back to how it was, but at least admitting that she misses it, that their friendship was like something that she kind of relied on, and he is not actually going to do that. He is definitely much more like reticent and sort of holding back emotionally, I think, because he doesn't want to be that kind of vulnerable with her right now. Which, I mean, honestly, after what she and Marina put him through is really understandable. Like, he did fuck up for sure, but what wound up happening was so out of proportion. So, yeah. Anyway, so he gets this, and then we go and hang out with Julia. And I'm just going to cover everything that goes on with Julia in one shot here. This dude, Richard, is talking to her about how her ability, for example, the thing that she did to Quentin, could be used for good. And that she needs to learn that it's not an all or nothing thing. That she can still practice magic while not simply like using it for its own sake, like a drug. That she can actually harness it for the sake of someone else. And he says, if you're not afraid of doing the work. And she immediately interrupts and says, I'm not. But I have to say, she obviously did not really think through what that work would look like, because, or at least like when she said, I'm not, I don't think she really had any idea of the gravity of some of the choices that she was going to wind up having to make. So what it turns out he wants her to do is go into the head of a woman who is disabled, and she is, like, mentally, she's still there, but she is not able to communicate with them. She can't talk. It doesn't seem like she can even move at all. Her name is Kira. And she's a black woman who's in this, like, convalescent home. And he brings Julia in. He asks her to close and lock the door, which I'm surprised is even allowed, but there you are. And he tells Kira, I want you to think of some place that you love. We're going to create that place in your mind. And it turns out Kira herself was a practitioner of magic as well. So she's not completely like flipped out at the fact that Julia can do this. She knows about magic, and she had been practicing magic in the place that she winds up taking Julia in the end. He says she's experienced in mental projection, and he said when she sort of tries to be like, I wouldn't say it's a specialty, obviously being a little bit concerned about the fact that he's making her sound like she has total control over things, when that is what fucked up last time, was the fact that she did not have total control over things. He steps in and is like, if anything winds up going wrong, I will pull you back. So he puts out all of these like little tools, sage, candles, like different things on this table, and begins to recite a spell. And Julia puts her hand down and joins in with him. And she ends up in a coffin and is flipping out. And she is in enough control here that she can overcome the fact that she's been put here. But for a moment, it is really freaky for her. And she says, I'm stuck. Which, when she says, I'm stuck, Richard, get me out of here, we screwed up, he doesn't bring her back right away. So I wonder if he knew Kira was going to test her like this. Or, like, because, you know, he says, if anything goes pear-shaped, I'll pull you back. What does that look like? Is he watching this? Can he see what's happening as well? And she says, Kira, if you don't want me in here, just let me go. I know shit Uma didn't know, because she's talking about Kill Bill, like how to become impervious to fire, so I will walk right out of here. And she holds her hand that is like got a ball of light in it to the wood of this coffin and lights it up so that it burns around her and she's able to escape out of it. And she opens her eyes and she's sitting on a park bench on an autumn day next to Kira. And she says, I just needed to see if you were any good before I let you near me. And I found this very amusing. So yeah, I really like this scene. She says, did Richard tell you who I am? And she looks down at this notepad that had appeared in her hand. And she says, oh my, like she had said, oh, he only told me that you're extremely smart. And when she looks down, there's a ton of like equations and notations and things written on this paper. And she says, I can barely comprehend this. And Kira says there was an answer. I could feel it. I couldn't get there. Then my body turned on me. So I think when she says this, there was an answer. I could feel it. She's talking about knowing that she was sick and that she was trying to do something to stop the progression of this, but then it got like so much worse so quickly that there was simply nothing to be done. So I sat and did the rest of it. You finished this in your mind? And she says, I talk, you write. And when you go back out, remember what you wrote. So that's a fucking big deal. Like, you know? So she is managing to eat and drink in this like moment. And it feels really real to her. I love her like savoring whatever it is she's eating. I don't know if it's a sandwich or a pastry or what. But like the idea that she is probably not actually eaten in God knows how long. Like she's probably fed either by feeding tube or, you know, intravenous like nutrients, something like this. But she says the framework from Popper 45 and begins reciting, and Julia starts writing it down. So let's see. She's talking about later on what exactly it was that caused her to choose this spot, someplace when he told her, think of someplace you love. She is remembering having been sitting here with her girlfriend and that they were practicing a spell during a rainstorm to make a tiny rainbow that lasted for about 10 seconds. And they were doing it over and over. And she's saying, like, I didn't study at Breakbills either. I was self-taught. And you can crack magic, even if you aren't taught, if you have the natural bent for it. And Julia says, what if it's all a party trick that never adds up to anything? And Kira says, so what if it doesn't? You know what I think about when I'm in here? And talks about this day and how just being able to practice that little piece of magic that was so silly and pointless is still one of the happiest moments of her entire life. And that it doesn't have to have any higher meaning. It doesn't have to lead to anything specific in order for it to be valuable. And honestly, I love this so much. This is a really like low-key beautiful moment. I feel like, and please bear with me because I swear this is not an anti-cell phone, anti-social media rant. I swear. But as I get older, I think back to moments when I was really happy. And it is not impossible for me to get there still. I still very recently have had moments of like pretty much perfect happiness. But it requires me to really be in the moment, to put down my work, to put down my external connections that can wait. They really can. And to simply absorb where I am, who I am with, what I am doing in a way that is 100% focused. And that takes another sort of work. And that takes a sort of like willingness to open yourself up to pain also. Because when you are in the moment and not using anything to distract yourself, there is a chance you are going to be allowing pain in that you didn't know was there because you were distracting yourself from it. And as somebody who frequently, during moments of quiet, is overtaken by deep sadness out of seemingly nowhere, it can be very scary to set aside the things that you've been using to distract yourself. And I really believe if you can experience the moment without kind of splitting your attention, that those moments, whether actually inherently meaningful in any specific way or not, are going to be better and more easy to recall as well. That being in the moment will fix them in your memory so that if you are having a bad time later, you are going to be able to recall that brief moment with more clarity. And I feel like that is also super important. Having those moments to hold on to helps us make it through when things get really bad. And I really think that part of what makes childhood memories so much more clear to us than our memories as adults is that as children, we are better at being in the moment. We are focused on the one thing at a time. And it's just different as you get older and you have lots of responsibilities and lots of things happening in life and lots of, there's a lot drawing on you. And you have to make a conscious effort to not let them pull you apart. So she asks Julia, show me one of your favorite moments. And Julia takes her to a little like under the table fort that she was in when she was 10 years old with Quentin. Nobody bothered us under here. It was like we were invisible. We'd read Fillory books for hours. And I just really love this. And she says, one day we made this. And she's looking at this map. She says, like, one day we were going to go visit. And there's a map that is painted on the underside of the table of Fillory. And she says, we were playing, but it felt real. And she doesn't actually, Kira doesn't actually say anything to her about like Fillory being real. So I'm assuming she doesn't know, because she says, I loved those books. She knows what Fillory is, but she doesn't like say, oh, by the way, that's totally a real place. But she says, it's the secret of how to be you. And then, okay, back to the park. Let's finish this puppy. So again, jumping ahead. If the world, okay, so she says, the world never helped a smart girl. Why should it? If the world goes after you, take it as a compliment. I also really like that. So finally, I could come back. We could do more. And Kira says, this was the really big one. And she says, no, but I bet that you have other things that you could share. And Kira says, well, I do. And she says, okay, what? And Kira says, kill me. And Julia is like, what? Absolutely not. And Kira is like, look, I'm allowed to be done. And Kira got some real good lines this episode, y'all. I'm allowed to be done. And Julia's like, I can't do that. And Kira says, well, I need you to. And then Julia wakes up. And she's sitting there with tears in her eyes looking at Richard, who is giving her a very solemn look like he fucking knows exactly what the hell Kira was going to say. And when he says, what did you think redemption really looks like? Did you think it was donating shoes to Africa? I was like, I mean, yes. Like, no, but yes. And she says, what if a magician finds a cure tomorrow? What if they can, and then she says, what if there is a hell and I burn for doing this? And he says, you're already in hell and so is she. And it is a pretty rough moment, like he says, she says, what am I supposed to do? And he says, whichever's hardest, which I guess is the redemption thing. And Julia finally agrees to do it. And she goes and sits or stands with Kira as darkness begins to close in with her. And asks if she should stay. And Kira's like, listen, you're going to be standing here when I'm found overdosed on a drug. Like, that's not a good idea. So here, have some of my ice cream. And then we're going to go. You're going to have to take off. And it's really touching. She says, have a good life. And then she is standing alone, eating her ice cream as the darkness closes in. And Julia wakes up and she is crying. Which, yeah, that's got to be really, really fucking difficult. And Richard packs up all of his stuff and they bounce out of there. And I can't help but wonder, is nobody going to put two and two together that he is the one that OD'd this girl? Like, they're going to have to figure this out, right? Like, what credentials is he showing people to come in and they're not figuring this out? Like, I feel like he's got to get a reputation, right? As like, I don't know. But I'm very curious if this is going to catch up with either one of them. So yeah, this whole thing with Julia, like, I have said before that I really liked having her to ground us in the real world. And this episode, I was very pleased that the grounding in the real world, it was still very magic focused, but it was like much more of a sort of mundane dilemma as well. Because this is an argument so many people have. Should we be allowed to die on our own terms if we are ill in a way that we will never recover from? And this is just a fucking daily ass question, you know, in a way that everything that's going on with Fillory is not. And I don't know, I really love that she is having to deal with much more real world challenges than Quentin and all of his friends are. What they've got going on is so spectacularly magical, which is fine. But having something like this to balance it out, I think, is really smart. So, all right, let's back up and let's talk about what was going on with Quentin. So, he says Fillory is always deciding, he's talking to Alice at this point, when the Chatwins go and deciding when to kick them out. Because Ember and Umber, the twin gods of Fillory, they get mean and they take everything away. And he says essentially, yes, they have their reasons. But that's what happened to the manuscript. For some reason, I didn't deserve it. Well, we find out that this isn't actually what happened. It turns out that indeed, fucking Penny took the manuscript. So they use a spell to try and like track it down, because even though he says this, I didn't deserve it, it doesn't seem like he really believes it just evaporated. He thinks he left it. So he uses this to like track the, you know, and he goes to Penny, and Penny at first denies it and then tells him, yeah, I did take it. I read it. It was trash. I spilled my beer on it, and then I threw it away. Dude. Really? Really? He's supposed to... There are so few people that I like on this show. Listen, Penny, I was starting to be on your side regarding, like, just hating Quentin, because he's very hateable. He really is. And that's fine. But when you get into this kind of shit, where you are just taking people's stuff and ruining it and throwing it away and then acting all, like, indignant that they're still looking for the thing that you stole, like they're really cramping your style by continuing to be concerned that something was of theirs just disappeared. I hate you so much. I hate you, though. What the fuck, Penny? He's such a dick about this. He's so dismissive about the whole thing. And considering everything that went on with Fillory, the fact that he wound up there, the fact that the beast was in front of him, and he doesn't fucking see the relevance of a book about Fillory that was never published, that was written by Jane Chatwin, that was probably really fucking important, Penny. How can you be this fucking casual and cavalier about it? Dude, seriously, use your motherfucking head, you jag. Ugh! Pisses me off. Gets on my nerves. He's such a douche. He doesn't need to be like this about it. I'm sorry, guys. I lost my temper. But I swear to God, he just doesn't, like, you know, he literally got stabbed and his heart was almost strangled by a fucking person from this world, and a wound from this world that nearly killed him, that the only reason they figured out how to fix it was because Quentin had information from having read these. Your life is owed to these books, dickhead. Why are you being like this? I swear to God, if somebody doesn't... I just hate him. It's amazing to me how much I hate him in this moment. Like, just really, he's being so disrespectful, but also like illogical, everything about it. And he says, first of all, what's his name didn't write it. And he, like, again, the girl did. Like, hello, this is really important. How can you not? Oh my God, how can you know this and yet you're acting like this isn't big information? She started off by saying that the other books are wrong and she wanted to go back and clarify some shit. This was the summer that the mom died. They were hanging out in Plover's mansion, eating crumpets. And he's trying to think. Jane and Martin opened a closet and they went to Fillory. No. Martin didn't go. Fillory kept forgetting him. Martin was crying like a little bitch about Fillory not wanting him anymore, and Jane said hang tight and she'll find some way. So she, like, corners one of these animals that have to grant you a wish. And she uses it to get a button that is supposed to bring you to Fillory that you can, like, use. And it's not like a button, like, you know, a button on a machine that you can press that'll activate something. It's a literal button, like a clothing button. So, yeah. She has this magic bow that she's used. Like, this is very, very Narnia, you know. And the way that he tells this is just so, oh, God, yeah. So he says this does make sense. In the last book, Martin is obsessed with finding the button. I think that's what he says, right? Yeah. In the last book, Martin is obsessed with finding the lost button. He's tearing Plover's house apart. The message boards are insane with different theories because the books just say that the button's magic. They don't have anything that they say that is specific about it. And he says it could still be there at Plover's house, and Martin just never found it. To which Penny, understandably, is like, you want to just get a fucking button that takes you right to where the beast comes from? Are you kidding me? To which Quentin is like, the beast has been able to get to us twice now. I would at least like to know that I can get to him the same way that he can just jump out and fucking stab us. Call me crazy, but I'd like to have some measure of control over the situation. This is in a manuscript that you're probably the only person to have ever read. There's a chance that the button is still out there. And he says, I'm going, and like it or not, Penny, you should come. And Penny rolls his eyes. Alice distracts Quentin, and she says she's going to come too. And he's thinking about being like, finding a quick way to England. And when he turns back, Penny's fucking gone because he is a dick. He is. He just is. Well, it turns out that we have a lovely little back door to Margot and Elliot's favorite pub. So they can get right to England. And when they come in, Elliot is just really, like, not looking great. He is very pale. He looks kind of clammy. And, like, has circles under his eyes like he hasn't been sleeping. And he decides that he is going to come with them, and he really doesn't want to know why. He just needs something to do to get his mind off of everything that just went down with Mike. I'm bored, and there was a dude who was hanging out with him that just left, and he's like, and what's his face gives really bad head. It's not his fault. TMJ. Oh God. So they head out to the house that is apparently, like, really a tourist trap a little bit, where they get led around by somebody who is, I don't even remember the significance, because the person who is leading them on this tour, I believe he goes by Hugh exactly, but he is, like, so aware of the history, and yet, like, enough that he can tell them about, like, a secret that winds up getting him killed, it seems. But he doesn't know as much about Fillory as Quentin. And there's a pretty, like, classic moment where he's, like, trying to tell the group something, and Quentin, like, corrects him. And I love, the kids got there first, Jane and Martin, then Rupert got injured. And Plover's previous work, he only got rejections for it. It just didn't really show the depth of the Fillory and Further series. And this dude says, I'm not sure I can do this tour without you. In a way that is honestly very, like, that I have to admire. As somebody who, like, interacts with the public and people who are extremely enthusiastic about properties that I cover and who know more and frequently come in with corrections to things that I said, you have to learn how to cope. And sometimes there are people who are doing it in a very, like, you know, in a really nice way. And they're just like, oh, hey, you got this wrong. And that's one thing. But then there are people who are like, here is an itemized list every episode of everything you got wrong. And it can be very frustrating because a lot of the times the corrections that they cite to you are not important. And you understand that they feel the need, but at the same time, it really, in the end, does not matter. It's not something that's integral to the plot that you're like, oh, God, thank you for that correction. That really changes my perspective on this, and that, actually. Oftentimes, it's just like, actually, it's pronounced this way. And you're like, come on. This is literally never coming up in the books again. Why are you feeling the need? So I kind of love that the way that he handled it, even though it's a little snarky and makes Alice sort of laugh at him. Plover's sister Prudence cared for him until his untimely death in 1952. Meanwhile, Elliot's out here just trying to, like, roam around into different rooms, but the tour guide's, like, facing them. He's not even trying to be, like, you know, careful about it. And he says he aided many children in the area. He was basically a philanthropist that focused specifically on children. And we find out later exactly what this added up to. He paid for the education of his housekeeper's children, George and Beatrix. Not only did he write for the Chatwins, but he took them in briefly when their mother died. Legend has it, Jane walked through a closet in this very house to get to Fillory. So, all of this leads to, in the end, them breaking off and doing their own thing. I love, though, that this is all mixed in with Quentin genuinely enjoying this tour and getting excited about being in the room where Plover wrote all of his stories. That there is, despite there being a mission here, that he can't help but still fanboy over the whole thing. It is just very relatable, you know? So they managed to, like, go into, they break into the house after dark. Elliot uses a spell to, like, disable the security cameras, but we find out later that wound up setting off the cameras. So it wasn't really, like, super effective. And they begin their search. And as they begin to search, it becomes more and more clear that this place is fucking haunted as balls, as Quentin puts it. And he is sitting at the desk and saying, this desk saved my life. I was 16 the first time I was hospitalized. I couldn't get out of bed at all. And my brain breaks sometimes. My dad brought me the books and I read them and I felt enough like me to at least try to get back in the game. And this is something that I find really interesting because I don't have this kind of intense mental illness that really renders me completely unable to function. I have a lower level where I'm still functioning to all intents and purposes, but things are falling apart behind the scenes. I'm really, really good at keeping up a pretense of everything being fine. And I'm really good at, you know, at just generally continuing on with routines and things that I know are necessary to keep everyone else off my back and keep them from asking questions about whether I'm okay. If I get to a point where things are bad enough that people are noticing, it's really, really bad. That by then, it's no bueno for me. But this kind of situation where he just basically goes under and the books are like a life preserver that carries him back to the surface, that is something that I have been told by others my podcast has managed to do for them, which is a real, like, I hate when I'm talking about something and I'm like really just genuinely talking about it, and then all of a sudden my whole body responds with like, oh, are you going to cry? We're going to make you cry. But seriously, being told that your work helped pull someone through something really dark, it really kind of doesn't get better than that. You know, like, that is fundamentally what I want to be to the world, is somebody who can offer a life preserver with humor and joy for people. So, anyway, him saying this got to me a little bit. That's all I'm saying. He says, I think that my brain just actually works better now. It's not that it's been fixed. It's just, and he says, would you break up with me if I told you that I've never been happier in my entire life? And Alice doesn't answer, but she gives him a look that really feels like she is super happy to hear that. So, meanwhile, Elliot, who is actually doing the work, has found a sort of hidden compartment in the room. And there's all sorts of shit in this. And it feels to me like finding this hidden compartment is sort of the catalyst for upsetting the house. Does that make sense? There's always, when you hear stories about different people who are living in houses that had low-level sort of activity in them, and then all of a sudden it really started up, like hardcore, seemingly out of nowhere, it feels like it is triggered often by renovations to the house or complete rearrangements of furniture or just things that sort of upset the sameness of the house, which is what ghosts seem to like latch on to. And I'm saying this as somebody who 100% believes in ghosts, BT dubs. If you don't believe in ghosts, fine. I think you're an idiot, but go off. Personally, I think ghosts are 100% a real thing. They make total sense to me. I think of them as more like a photograph of a person that just is still here. Not necessarily like their spirit is still hanging around, but more like they made an imprint somewhere, like a photo that continues on with a pattern that they either it was a pattern that they did so often that it left a print, or it was a moment so traumatic that there was like an explosion of energy that came from them from this trauma that caused an imprint on the space. So yeah, because like, honestly, think about what it's like that we can take a photo and how insane photos are. Like really just think about the physics of film and the way that light works and stuff. Is a ghost like an actual something in the air? Is that really so out of the realm of possibility? Like it's just light and physics to me, you know. I don't know. It doesn't have to be mystical is what I'm saying. It could just be something that we just don't physically get yet, but that it's 100% real. But anyway, he's reading these letters that are about how he's missing, but he isn't actually dead, and she wants a death certificate issued because they don't have his body, but they need to be able to like move on with their lives. And if you can't prove that somebody is dead, then they're, you know, usually, and depending on, you know, this era and what the laws were like here, there is usually like a wait period for how long somebody has to be missing before they can be officially declared dead. So he's a little shocked that like this death, they lied about it. So they said that he was actually gone, or that he died, but that he probably like went to Fillory and has not come back. So yeah, maybe it was just easier to say he died. He doesn't, this whole thing is really turning into a pretty fun mystery that I enjoy. He was studying magic, is what it turns out. And they are finding all kinds of books on magic in his study, which are specific to travelers. So either he was one, like Penny, or he wanted to be one and was trying to learn the skills to do it. And there is a theory that if he did it wrong, he might have blown himself up or got torn to shreds or wound up somewhere that he didn't want to be and died that way. Or maybe it worked and he just decided not to come back. And as they're talking about this, something walks past the door. And there is the beginning of the fucking haunting. Guys, honestly, this is done in such a fucking goofy, tropey way, and it's still so creepy to me. It really, I am such a sucker for the haunted house thing. You can have all kinds of murderers. You can have, slasher films. That shit does not scare me. The only times that I'll, be scared in moments in those movies are jump scares, where you just, they are trying to startle you. But as far as hauntings, that shit fucks me up. I don't get the same way about there's a demon or whatever. I don't believe in demons. I believe in ghosts, not demons. But when you're just talking about a house that's got some weird shit happening, I totally, completely believe that this shit really exists and that people see things and that there are moments where shit you can't explain is going, moving, that there are sounds that don't make sense, all of this. So the tour guide turns up and is yelling at them for breaking in. They're asking, do you know what really happened to Plover? And they're asking this dude, and he doesn't realize at this point that Penny can read his mind, but Penny can't even make sense of anything that he's thinking because he's panicking so badly that he is essentially illegible, right? So they're asking him, what was the real deal? And he says he was involved in some dark things. There's a book hidden in the writing room. Prudence said she didn't want anyone to know the unnatural things her brother, and then the lights start to flash. A figure appears in front of him really quickly. The lights flash again and he's gone. And then you hear this banging sound, and they find him further on down the hallway, and he is laying there dead with his mouth sewn shut and his throat cut. Y'all, this is some dark, dark shit. And I have to say, that mouth being sewn shut thing, I have seen that on, mild spoilers, on Orphan Black. That's the one. And it never ceases to be one of the worst things that I can think of. That is just so horrifying to me. But yeah, so they decide that they are going to get the fuck out of there. And they run outside, and they sort of have to regroup because it's pretty clear that some shit, they have tapped into something enough that they are on the right track. So they can't completely abandon it. And when they run out of there, it's just Penny and Quentin that wind up outside. But Alice and Elliot are still in there somewhere. So they have to go in and look for them. And there are a couple of rooms that are closed off that are not meant to be toured by everybody. So they specifically go into those rooms to try and find out. And we find Alice and Elliot tied up in a child's playroom where they are supposed to have a tea party. And there's this creepy little ghost girl who is hanging out with them and playing with them. And this fucking woman comes in, Prudence, we find out her name is, and pours some tea. And somehow Alice does not see that this woman is putting something in the tea. I thought it was just poison, but we find out later that it's a drug, and that she would drug the kids when they were overly energetic, when they were doing anything that would distract from from her brother's writing. And this little girl seems normal, but then the lights flash and she looks like a corpse, and there's like blood pouring out of her mouth. And she says she's coming, and Alice's face just like, ugh. So the lights flash again. It's all warmly lit in here, and everything seems normal. The little girl seems normal. And Prudence is tying her hands and pouring the tea. And is talking about how her brother's too soft, caring for you when he needs peace to work. He has no idea how naughty you truly are. And now drink your tea, and puts it down in front of all of them. And this little girl drinks it and winds up coughing up all this blood. So it becomes pretty clear that she was probably inadvertently poisoned to death by this woman. It seems like that's what happened, is like these kids got sort of picked off one by one by accident, but nevertheless, because she was just really cruel. Meanwhile, we have Penny and Quentin, who are still walking around trying to find their friends, and they watch Jane walk down a hallway, and she is with Martin, and he watches her walk into a doorway to get to Fillory, and is really upset because she doesn't like hold the door for him. She goes without him. And when he opens the door, it's just a regular closet. And Plover comes up and is just like, hey, what's the matter? And he explains that he doesn't know what's wrong with him, that he can't go. And Plover is like, oh, well, you know, things aren't fair sometimes. And I've been left behind too. And it's okay. We need to go and have some tea. And this theme continues of Prudence showing up and reprimanding them. Every time the lights flash, it means that Prudence is coming. And at one point, a very small boy grabs Quentin's hand and is like, she's coming, we need to hide. And Quentin vanishes, but Penny is still standing there. And he winds up in like a similar to the Beast's basement area where he is chained up, or tied up rather, but there are like prints on the walls, like there were little kids down here. It's a kind of a weird thing that why would there be like paint handprints from children in this place? Like it doesn't make a lot of sense, but whatever. She says, insolent is what you are. I've told you, I'll sew it shut. And she has this fucking needle and thread. And luckily for him, he's a traveler and he manages to just disappear the fuck out of there. Meanwhile, we have Quentin, who is hiding with this little boy and watching through the grating of the writing room as Plover talks to Martin. And he's given him some cookies and pulls out this case. And the little boy has this look on his face when he pulls the case out. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? And we find out very quickly that this is the case that he keeps his camera in. And Martin is just like, he gets distracted because Jane comes in and talks about Fillory. Martin tries to use that to like get away from Plover. But eventually, Jane is given some tea, and she also passes out. Because apparently these kids are not, like, they don't seem to really be aware of what's being done to them. I don't know how much they know about, like it's hard to tell. They're children, why would they suspect this? And he pulls out his camera and his sister comes in and like gives him this look before she closes the door. I assume his sister knows all about what is being done to these kids as well, I think. And when Martin tries to put up any sort of resistance to Plover telling him to take his clothes off, Plover tells him, I cared for you and your sister, and you're lucky to have me out here looking out for you, because I didn't have anyone looking out for me when I was a kid. I care about you. And just completely emotionally blackmails this kid. And it's horrifying, like the way, I think we could find a way to go to Fillory as he's like taking these photos. We could be together. You're a lovely boy, Martin. As he looks at him and then now turn around. And it is like so, this is a really well done scene. It's just so awful. It's so awful. And the littlest kid, who I think is George, is like in the grate with Quentin watching and says, they play like this all the time. A whole pile of naughty pictures hidden in the dictionary. And at this point, Prudence comes in and is enraged with this little boy because he's been spying and knows what's happening. And she tosses him and he hits his head and dies from this like head injury pretty much right away. And for a moment, she's just kind of like, damn it. But then she's like, well, to the quiet place. And I'm pretty sure that there are just tons of bodies in the basement, right? Because they wind up having to like go down there and dig this shit up. And they find the bodies and the button in the grave. I really want to know how they are all going to handle this information, because I feel like this needs to be told. I feel like Quentin needs to out Plover for what he was. And when they leave, Alice is really not okay with just bailing. In her mind, these ghosts are stuck here reliving the worst and most traumatic moments of their life over and over and over again. And she thinks that they need to do something to help get the kids out of there. And at this point, Elliot just kind of snaps and is just like, why would you think that being dead makes things more fair? Life isn't fair. Death isn't fair. That's the fucking way it is. And you need to fucking get over it. And is just a huge dick about this until eventually he goes far enough that Quentin is just like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Stop it. Like, and he tells her something, who the fuck do you think you really are? You're just some arrogant little twat. And that finally Quentin says, shut the fuck up. Because yes, this is his girlfriend. I would have appreciated, honestly, if he had gotten a little bit more up in his face, but still. He says, if we're going to go, we've got to go. But I'm hopeful that they can come back and do something about this, because I feel like getting all of this information out to the public would help these kids be able to move on. What they say happened is more of a time slip of, part of it is, like, part of it's actual ghosts, but then the things that, like, Quentin and Penny were watching were time slips where the house is sort of trying to reveal to you what happened, which is something that, like, I've seen in a lot of other shows as well. And when they walk away, you see the kids standing in the window watching them go. And that's kind of what I feel like they were watching to see, what are these people going to do about it now that they know? And right now, they're going to walk away. And that must suck to be one of these kids watching this, and these people who, like, know the truth about the worst things that happened, these murders, just leave, you know? And back at the house, Penny and Elliot are both drinking, and Alice and Quentin are sitting together and she is just wound really tight. And it's just like, I am not okay. No, I'm not. Are you okay? And he's like, no, of course I'm fucking not. Like, this is, the whole thing is the worst thing I've ever found out about something that meant everything to me. And I think that Plover went into Fillory and became the fucking beast. This man who I idolized is probably the same monster that has been out here trying to kill me, that took my Dean's eyes out, that stabbed Penny and almost killed him. He's like, I cannot, of course I'm not okay. So Penny comes in at this point and says, let's see this button. Quentin puts it on the table and Penny starts to touch it. And Quentin is like, dude, I really just would not do that. And Penny gets super snobby about it. And it's just like, I'm a traveler who's been trained by, what's his name? Mayakinov, whatever. And he's like, I'm not going anywhere unless Mayakovsky, that's what. I stay put until I want to go. And then he touches it and boop, he gone. Guess what else is gone? The fucking button. This Jag. I'm sick of you, Penny. You're an idiot. And I love the look that Elliot gets on his face when he disappears. He just does this like deep sigh. Like, fucking really? And you know what, Elliot? I feel you, buddy. I really do. I'm getting irritated. These people just don't think things through. But Penny especially. Like, Penny, I can't, you can't keep up this cool charade if you're also really stupid about everything, dude. You have to, if you want to be cool, you also have to be somebody who's like perceptive about things. You have to back up your coolness with something about you that makes you feel like you are separate from everyone else. And the only separateness you have right now is that you are really not putting two and two together or using logic about any of this, even though you have almost died because of it, which doesn't do anything, dude. Ugh. Everybody sending me hearts and love in the comments. Thanks, guys. And Jesse says, I loved/hated seeing the kids in the window as they all left. Yeah, totally. It just feels like being let down again, It's just really sad. I hope to God that they reveal everything, but I wonder about that tour guide and if they're going to find his body. Is he actually there? Or because the ghosts are still fucking doing shit and functioning when they leave. So can he be picked up and taken by a ghost and buried in the basement and nobody finds out? I'm just really curious how that goes. Would the ghost even care if enough to do that, to hide it? Or would the ghost be like, yeah, sure, they can find the body. What are they going to say? Ghosts must have done it. Of course not. But do the ghosts know that they're ghosts either? I don't know. There's a lot of questions. I'm just saying. So I have to wrap this up, but thank you very much to Mathy for commissioning this. And I'm excited that we have started to turn the corner for regarding Fillory and get into the real world implications of people who were involved with Fillory in a different way. That it's not just, this is another real world grounding that I like, in other words. So looking forward to the next one. Thank you guys all so much for coming and for hanging out with me. And I will see you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.